Three, two, one, and we are live. So if anyone is watching, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time it is. I am here with the one and only Chris Mohan to talk about movies. Chris, what have you been up to? How are you?
So I have, thank you very much, first of all, for having me
Thank
on.
you.
No better way to spend a Friday night. You don't know what you've let yourself in for wanting to talk about movies. I tend to go off on a bit of tangents at the best of times, but then who doesn't? I think it's. I look at my uncles and my grandas and all of that kind of stuff that are still on. Sometimes they just leave themselves in room to start them on a topic. You walk away and leave them alone. They can talk to an empty room for about a couple of hours, and you come back and they're still going. I think it's one of those things of later stage meal life. Not saying we're quite there yet, but
Close. In football terms, we're close to the second half, aren't we?
Oh, absolutely, yeah, for sure.
So I'm going to own up. I very curious, but didn't quite catch your last video. What's this movie thing that you were talking about?
The movie? Oh, movie?
Yeah.
So Mubi is another one of those streaming services.
Right.
So there's like a million of them, right? And some of them are for very popular stuff, things that people recognize. So like Disney has their own one, for instance. But Mubi very much specializes in, I would say, art house independent cinema or world cinema or classic cinema, something like that.
Right.
And aims to serve you a different movie every day with the kind of like suggestion of, if you want to watch a movie today, watch this, and these are the reasons why. That's kind of their whole shtick in that way. So some of them are good, some of them are bad.
It is what it is. That's right.
Yeah.
Because there's a couple of things that I really wanted to pick your brains on. I think you know a lot more than me about movies, but sort of the current state of cinema, and in particular franchises, right?
Mm-hmm.
It seems like we are witnessing the death of franchises. I'm thinking Star Wars, Marvel, like the DC universe, that kind of stuff. They didn't really quite. So, like, I think everyone gets fed up of things at some point.
That's right.
But it seems that at the moment, whatever Marvel Disney touch turns into not great. So what do you think is going on there? That seems to have accelerated. And the new Indiana Jones movie, maybe we can talk about it later. But like, what are they doing? What's going on?
See, this is not a problem you have. I think when you have so much money, you just want to play it safe all the time. I think that's part of what it comes by. So the people that are financing the movies are really risk adverse. That's not how they made their money. They didn't make their money by taking lots of risks, or maybe they took one risk and it paid off, and then they have the thing. So, I mean, I was looking at the cinema listings near me, and those listings are for a certain age range, I would say, because that's the movie going generation. Do you know what I mean? Anything from about 13 to late 20s, early 30s. That's who they're trying to capture. And because of that, whatever's popular when you're 13, 14, 15, or anything at that stage, they will milk you for the duration of that lifespan from 13 to 30. If you want to say, I'm just going to keep on giving you what you want here. I mean, it's not that dissimilar to, I know you did the video about where can I get what's new in fantasy, reading books, that kind of idea. When you have read a lot of fantasy or you've watched a lot of the same type of movies, there is a point where they've taken the formula and the tropes are the same. They can dress it up with a little bit at the end, but you have to, in fantasy book terms, you have to make it through 600 pages of a book before you can get to that part of the same. And I think you get a bit of rot with, this needs something else new. This needs reinvented, which is why at franchises like Marvel DC, which seems to have been lasting for about the past 10, probably 15 years, we're coming to the late stage of that because all that's happening in those movies is they're 3 hours long now.
Yeah.
And they, I go to see them all in the cinema because I have kids that obviously do want to go and see, are very much in the middle of that. And at a certain point, I just keep on going, remember, this isn't really for me anymore. I still think I'm that 16-year-old boy that get really excited about comics, that get really excited about superheroes, all that kind of stuff. But actually going there now, I'm like, they're not making this for me. Stop being critical of the things that annoy you because you've done comic book stories, whether in graphic novel form or otherwise, and just kind of take it for what it is. Because I look to the left of me and I see my kids and they're like, this is amazing. This is the great. Every film they go and see, they come out and go, that's the greatest thing I've ever seen. Hey, Sam.
But is it a case of some franchises, to my mind, have lasted quite a long time? So think about the Alien franchise, right?
Yes.
I mean, is it a case that you need to take more time in between movies, let things cool down, and then, because when Ridley Scott came back with Prometheus and all that stuff, I mean, was he riding on the nostalgia trip for people like me that watched Alien like one Friday night on TV and thought like, wow, what is this? And then you are in your 30s and you get like the next installment in the franchise and you're still excited about it because it hasn't been milked to death. Is there an element of that? Right, knowing how to play it?
There could be. Prometheus is really interesting one because it isn't called Alien Prometheus, right? So often when you do a reboot of a franchise like that, you're very much trying to do exactly what you said. You know, somebody that thinks, oh God, I seen that great Alien movie one Friday night, as you say, on TV along going, I'd really like to see another one. And they kind of put it in the title. It's kind of what's going to happen with the Indiana Jones movies. People are like, oh, loved Indiana Jones, Last Crusade. Everybody forgets about Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Block that one out.
I don't.
But, you know, they kind of do that. Whereas Prometheus was its own separate thing. I remember going to see Prometheus and having no idea, because I don't watch trailers, that it was an Alien movie until about the last 20 minutes of the movie and went, oh my God, this is an Alien movie. I should have known it's a Ridley Scott movie. Like, how can I be so dumb? I bet you I'm the only person that went to the cinema to see this and didn't realize it was an Alien movie. But the payoff of that being awesome, because then it does totally trip the nostalgia thing in it. And I'm like, oh, this is a great movie now because I can identify with some of this.
But even though maybe playing with the nostalgia thing, but it tried to do something new. It wasn't just a rehash of. So like another franchise that maybe I think has done it really well is the Rocky franchise, the Rocky Balboa.
Yeah, but Creed now, yeah.
Because then we got like, I really enjoyed the Rocky 6, the Balboa, where he's
yes,
and he comes back for like one final exit. Like that was a really sweet movie because I think it also captures the essence of those boxers that can never really let go, and they always come back for one final fight. That's
right.
One too many. So, but he spaced out the movies over time, and then when he hit you with Balboa out of nowhere, like I went to the cinema. I wanted to watch it.
It's hey Drew. Balboa, Rocky's another one. Again, I would say you look at those even first 6 movies without even going to Creed, as you say, like Balboa came out of nowhere. I wonder if it just got to the point of, especially if you're a creator and you decide, oh, I can't do any more of that character at the moment because, you know, I'm burnt out or whatever. And at a certain stage you go, but I like that character. And I feel like there's another story to tell, and you wait for the idea to come to you to kind of say, well, this would be interesting if I did this with it. Because Rocky, the misremembered franchise, the first film is very different from the other 5 that followed it. It's very much about working class. It's not really much about the boxing, if you know what I mean. It's very much about a working class man, you know, poverty, all of that kind of stuff. It's a real examination of that character, which I think is just a massively underrated film. But it doesn't detract from the fact that 2, 3, especially 4, 5, not so much. 6, as you say, Balboa, it's a good film. You know, there are some real high points throughout that whole thing, but you always sort of get your money worth out of Balboa, and I think all of them have got Stallone at the heart of them, not just in terms of character, but he's a creative voice.
So, do you think it's because, I mean, Rocky must be very close to Stallone's heart? It was the movie he wrote, it's the one he wanted to direct, it's the one he sold his dog for, and then he bought back when he made the money back. So he deeply cared about the character and the story. But with these other franchises, Marvel, DC, all the stuff, there's not that emotional attachment and involvement with the project. It's just product.
It is very much, it's about merchandising and what you can sell alongside it. I mean, it's selling the Disney Plus streaming service. It's getting people to go to the cinema. It's selling t-shirts, figures, everything goes with it.
But it's failing to do all of those things, isn't it? So I don't know, maybe the audience can smell the BS. I don't know.
Well, the characters that we're looking at now just aren't. They aren't, one, as recognizable, or two, is interesting. Really, I mean, Quantum Mania was an absolute car crash of a TV or of a movie, like an absolute. I feel to see much artistic merit in that. It's Multiverse, quite like the Doctor Strange movie, and then I watched Guardians of the Galaxy, which I thought was fine. But all those films suffer from a case of this is an hour too long. And I think at a certain point, you if you're going to a cinema to see a movie that is supposed to be exciting, action-packed, all of that kind of stuff, and you find yourself in the middle of it going, oh my God, how long has this been going on for? At a certain point, maybe it isn't just the movie that's feeling, but it's just the fatigue of seeing that type of movie again and again. And at a certain point, you're like, I could watch this one in the house next time. I could wait for this to come to streaming or something rather than shell out and buy the ticket. But if you don't buy the ticket, they're not making another one. And I think they're caught in a weird place.
I think the problem with the Marvel cinematic universe is that, I mean, as a piece of cinema history, all those movies interlinked, coming together at the end. Like, I gave up. Don't get me wrong. I didn't get all the way to, the last Thanos thing, but I appreciate that, as a project, never been done before, right?
Yeah.
Super massive scale. But I think you're done. Like, those characters that people have cared about and we've been involved with, like, Robert Downey Jr. is forever going to be Iron Man. No one else can play Iron Man.
For sure. Yeah, that's right.
And all that kind of stuff. Is it a point of knowing when you finish and when you're done with that product? And they're failing to do that?
Yeah, I mean, you're quite possibly true. As you probably know, it's a guy called Kevin Feige is the guy that runs the entire universe, so to speak. So he's been given creative control, which is kind of what DC are trying to do, reinvent with James Gunn. And I think they've got a similarly creative voice. But 15 films in, he created a natural endpoint for it to kind of say, right, we're done with this arc of stories. And they talk about phase 4 and phase 5 and all of that kind of stuff. And I think he probably knew the writing was on the wall a little bit, because you do that to kind of say, look, after this, he can write in his autobiography and say, this wasn't me, this was the money people. I told you this was the end of the story in some way. And we're going to look at these kind of, they even said we're going to investigate these kind of side characters or kind of more fringe characters in the Marvel Universe and kind of do that. And as you say, to sort of not great success, I think, in the whole totality of it, because there is no Avengers film to pull it together anymore. That's not happening.
And the next characters that came out in Phase 4, the Inhumans and all that lot, like, unless you're really a comic book fan, no one knows about them. No one cares about them, isn't it?
Yeah, so, I mean, you're a big comic book guy, as I know. If anybody has been reading those comics, they'd be very excited to see that kind of put in the screen. But again, there's no real interconnectedness between those characters, putting them together like the Avengers movies did. Even though I don't really like the Avengers movies, because I think they're too much of a good thing. I like the kind of character stories a lot more than the big overarching stories. Same with the comics. Like, I like character stories rather than big events.
I really rated the TV show, the Devil.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, first series especially.
Yeah, absolutely. Then once they go into all the other little characters like Iron Fist and Luke Cage, it's like, no, it's too much. It gets a bit, when I watch other things.
First series of Jessica Jones is spectacularly good as well, mainly because David Tennant, I think, is one of the best baddies that's screen. But you use his talents, you use one actor's talents. Second series of car crash.
Yeah, but Drew, you're right. But the point is, like, sometimes, because what annoys me is that they end up destroying the franchise. Like with this new Indy Jones movie, like, I'm not gonna watch it. I really am not. I'm hearing a lot of negativity from it because, like I said, like, Stallone really respected and loved the character of Rocky. He knew what he was and what it was about. But this new movie, like, from what I hear, like, Indy Jones is this dejected guy that just been served divorce papers, and he's like, no one gives a shit anymore about his lessons at university. They're like, these are the heroes we grew up with. We don't want to see them like that. It may have happened off the page if you want, but don't show me that, because I remember going to the cinema and seeing the boulder, in Raiders at the beginning, and to me, I think probably that's the very first movie I've got a memory of going to the cinema to watch with my dad, and that scene was just like, that's it. I was hooked on Indy Jones. I don't want to see him as a 80-year-old semi-alcoholic, depressed guy. It's not, they are heroes.
Yeah, it's hard to make an action movie with somebody that's restricted movement. You know what I mean? It takes a certain bit of believability away. Even if you think back to Force Awakens, when obviously Harrison Ford played Han Solo in what was a very much more restricted role. I think they sort of did that as well as they could, insofar as they give him very little to do. Give him a payoff at the end of a send-off and said, "Look, all the best, take care."
Yeah. But because, and also it's the lack of respect for the original character, like what they did to Luke Skywalker in the last trilogy of Star Wars was terrible. That was sort of character, like what and Mark Hamill said it in press conferences, like he totally disagreed with what they were doing to the character, how it was being portrayed and everything. Like, I really wanted to watch that trilogy, but I never finished it. I watched the first two, and then I checked out. I just got really depressing.
That was one of those ones I just looked at and went, "It's not for me. This is for my kids. This is them." Like having the female protagonist, all of that kind of stuff was at least something that they could latch on to. And my eldest is a pretty big Star Wars fan now.
Right.
Because of those movies. I can go and look the third movie. This doesn't make any sense. Again, you can't rewrite history and make it so that the previous, 8 movies that they were kind of no consequence, because we've just rewrote the rule book and to bring a character back, because it's kind of, we're trying to bring people in. We're going to bring back characters that you recognize because that'll sell more tickets in the thing. It'll make for a better trailer, but doesn't make for a better product.
But do you think the reason they keep bringing back these characters is because the new ones are not that good?
Very possible. Because you've also got to remember, the original Star Wars movies when they came out, 1977, they were well spaced out.
Yeah.
So, like 77 to the Empire coming out, there was a big gap, and there was a fervor built. Yeah. So there was like a fervor and a cult built up in that time period between us. We want more of this. So you give people 6 years of waiting. We get 4 or 5 Marvel movies a year. It's not the same thing anymore. You're not creating the thing that just did. And obviously we live in a world where streaming services mean that I'm going to be able to see it at my house. And it's not like it was years ago. But you've got to let things grow naturally. Things need to take a life of their own. That's why certain movies don't find their audience till way, way later, and until they come back and get revisited again.
Yeah. Okay. So I just want to go in 2 different directions. I don't know what's going to happen here because of my mind now. So because we were talking about because sometimes, and I watch a few channels, people that are critical about movies, and I don't think I don't mind that the main character is a woman. Like I don't dislike a main character just because it's a woman. Like Sigourney Weaver was brilliant in Aliens. I think the most recent Tomb Raider movie, I quite enjoyed that. I think it was quite a watchable, treasure hunt movie, probably better than the previous one with what's her face?
Angelina Jolie.
Angelina Jolie, yeah, that's right. The one with Alicia Vikander, I quite enjoyed it.
She was more of a woman. I would say the Angelina Jolie, and what they do an awful lot with female characters in action roles is they sort of try and masculinize them. Where they kind of make them this very butch version. Whereas I think the interesting part is when they're still, Lara Croft's at her best when you realize that she's vulnerable. That there is a vulnerableness there. But I'd say that for most good, believable action stories, that aren't just power fantasies that are trying to tell character-based stories, you have to feel that there's risk involved, which is why Superman stories is so hard to do, because There's only one thing defeats Superman. Like, and once you've told that story,
yeah,
what are you gonna do?
I hate Superman because he always takes the kryptonite off, and he's fine. He's the least likable superhero. I don't understand him. I don't get it. But back to that, I think more often than not, the problem with female characters is that sort of female protagonists is that it's not very well written, and you're meant to like it just because it's a woman and it's something different. But and the other thing I was going to say, completely tangential here, nothing to do with it. Talking about spacing out movies, Bond is a franchise that does that really well because they come up with a movie every 3 years, if not.
Yes, indeed. Yeah.
I remember when you must remember as well, when GoldenEye came out, when the first Pierce Brosnan movie, it was an event. I went to the cinema. It had been so long since we had a Bond movie.
Yeah. And
then you go and see the initial credits and the whole, Soviet system collapsing thing. I was like, yeah, I'm here. Awesome. And then, I mean, the following ones were a bit shit, let's be honest here. but GoldenEye was fantastic.
Like, the Brosnan ones, I think, are interesting because I agree with you. I went to see GoldenEye when it came out as well, and it was phenomenal. Yeah. Between Robbie Coltrane and Famke Janssen, as being able to kill you by crushing her between your legs is just genius. All that stuff's great. And then the other Brosnan movies sort of became the very hammy part of Bond, but I think they were very open in that's what they were trying to do. They were just kind of trying to be this very, not serious, kind of merely playing a joke on itself. And it wasn't until obviously you go full reversal then with Craig come back and it was very gritty and dark and all of that kind of stuff. And having that contrast between them actually makes for a better franchise because it means you kind of go again.
Yeah. And absolutely. When Casino Royale came out, you want to see the new Bond. And it's been years since, and it's an event. And I think they can probably keep on churning out Bond movies for the next 30 years. And I'll be watching them because I think they're doing it right.
Yeah, so I mean, the contrast that's kind of similar is the Batman movies because Batman will always come around and go. But the joke is, of course, when the Keaton Batman came out, there was a contrast to Adam West, from many years ago.
Yeah.
It was like, oh, this is a darker, more serious, brutal version of it. That's okay. Then you do the Nolan movies with Bale. Well, this is darker still, grittier. And then you go to Matt Reeves one, which is obviously Robert Pattinson, and it's darker and grittier still. At some point, this whole film is going to be in the dark. By the time that they reboot it, it has to do something else. It can't get much grittier and darker. And I like all of those movies to more or less degrees. Some of the Schumacher ones are hammy, as Sam said, can't do.
I couldn't. Okay, hang on. So two things. I couldn't stand the Schumacher movies. I really couldn't. And even the second Keaton movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Catwoman with Batman Returns.
Yeah, that wasn't great.
That's all right.
And then enlighten me. What is the difference between camp and hammy? What for a non-English native? I'm sure Sam can help as well. Camp, I get. Rocky Horror, I get that.
Yeah.
But
hammy is sort of, for me anyway, it's very, genre-specific dialogue, so nothing really original. Stuff that is very much plays on kind of how predictable it is. Nearly like the costumes would be kind of very much, or like if the body's a Russian, it can't be played by a Russian guy. It has to be played by an Englishman doing a Russian accent. That's hammy. That kind of thing. You can't have people doing as authentic kind of characters. They have to be like kind of stereotypical versions of themselves, or something like that. I think that's the way that I would describe it, which it definitely did.
I get that. Yeah, I get that.
Even you think of was it the word is not up there, like Alec Carver, Jonathan Pryce with the eye monocle and stuff like that's very much on the nose for being a bad guy, the kind of thing. So yeah,
the self-conscious, over-the-top performance. All right. Fair enough.
You did that better than I did.
And this is why we have these conversations. I just learned something. Yeah. But the thing about Batman, though, and the thing I don't understand either, is that there are some exceptionally good stories to tell in the Batman canon,
Yes.
and they're not telling them. They're kind of hinting out, like the most recent one with Robert Pattinson. I enjoyed that movie, and it takes bits from the Long Halloween, Dark Victory, Tim Sale, and Jeff Love, and I wish they would take those and turn them into movies.
I mean, I sort of feel, obviously, with the end of the spoilers, Joker's at the end of it. So, shock horror. I think they're probably going to lean towards Killing Joke next. If they're going to do Barry Keoghan, which would be an obvious choice, probably the most successful and famous of all of the graphic novels, I would imagine. I'd be surprised if they didn't, because obviously Batman Begins was the comic as well, very much, a retelling of that. Yeah.
The Frank Miller
year one. Yeah, indeed. So there are stories to tell, and I like, as Batman comic guy, I like detective comics. Those are my favorite. Like, I like the detective comics, and that's kind of why I like the newer Batman, because there was a good lot of detective comics in the makeup of how he solved the crime, rather than just kind of.
Yeah.
You've got to show he's smart, and putting him against Paul Dano's Riddler character, he was also very smart. I think worked very well for me. I think that's one of the bits that I really like about that movie. So more detective comics for me. I like if Robert Pattinson's Batman became more about intelligence and being smart than necessarily about being brutal or gritty or skirting the line between violence and all that kind of stuff. That stuff's less interesting to me now, because that's been done so often.
Yeah, and I think those movies would probably be cheaper to produce.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll definitely like to see that. The other topic that I was having a conversation with my wife about, but whenever we get into the racial stuff, I have to tiptoe around the house, is the Cleopatra thing. In general, sort of the race swapping of characters, because we had that with the Little Mermaid as well and stuff like that.
That's right, yeah.
And now, so I get, like, Hollywood has been adapting movies and resetting movies since the beginning of time, because I'm not going to tell you something you do not. The Magnificent Seven is just the Seven Samurai taken out of the Japanese context.
Indeed.
Yeah. Even Tarantino, Reservoir Dogs, is another. It's a Chinese movie, isn't it? I think it is. And The Departed is actually Infernal
Affairs. Yeah.
So Hollywood has been doing that forever. But I think there's a difference between a resetting and an outright gender swap or a race swap, because again, we go back to people have grown up to love and care and identify or just generally be a fan of these characters. And when you change things around, I think you should expect some backlash, because you're messing up with something that people hold dear.
Yeah.
But I don't know if that's like, because my wife's argument is like, what do you care? And it's like, yeah, on the grand scheme of things, I don't care. I'm not going to lose sleep over it. But, just be respectful of, like you said, the canon and what can be. I don't know. Where do you stand on that?
So, I do an English lesson with people where I talk about, one of the most famous archetypes of stories is the Frankenstein story, right? And Frankenstein's story of the creator creating a monster that he thought was going to be perfect, but actually what he creates, he actually is revolted by and turned off by. So the thing that's supposed to be the best part of him becomes something that he hates. And I ask the students, try and think of how many times this story has been retold and remade in movies. Sometimes to positive effect, sometimes negative. So I would kind of talk about, like, Edward Scissorhands is sort of a Frankenstein remake, except he is loved, in some ways. RoboCop is the version of Frankenstein where he's made to save lives, essentially, by using dead police officers as current police officers, but he's going to be hated. He's despised for it, So there are ways that you can do famous archetypes of stories that are inventive and modern and current, and the ones that do it very well become very famous, and people do not realize or really associate things like RoboCop with just the Frankenstein story, because it becomes its own thing. But like you say, the easiest thing to do is go, right, we'll swap the male character for a female lead character, and we'll tell the same story, except she'll be a girl instead of a boy. And I think that's when you're saying, female characters not being well written. It's with that was the premise that set out to be made from. That wasn't somebody going, do you know what would be interesting? If we took this world that was created and did this with it or put it in this setting, because I actually think the socio-political stuff would be more interesting and people would take away something different from that rather than kind of just going very easily, let's put a color skin over it. Like, how many times are they going to remake Charlie and the Chocolate Factory now?
Yeah.
We're going for number 3, and they really haven't, by the looks of it, they really haven't changed it any time other than using the personalities of the people that are going to be playing. You know, it's essentially going to be the same movie.
So do you think that it's just laziness on the part of the... Because, like, as well, all these Disney real-life remakes, like, I don't see a need to change any of the original animated movies one bit.
But wasn't that the argument when Steve Jobs took over Disney and he stopped all of the sequel making that were direct-to-video? So when they were making, he stopped Beauty and the Beast 2, which all these films are now wiped from history because he went, look, what you're doing is you're cheapening the IP, you're cheapening the franchises and the great stories and films that these once were by cashing in and making money and making cheaper and lesser versions of them. You know, you're not giving them the same budget, you're not treating them the same. But as Matt says, laziness probably not so much, but it's a money-making thing. And when producers and studios are making money, they're like, right, we want to make a movie for X amount of money, and we want to return that 3-4 times over. And the only way you can really do that is to either make a new franchise or use an existing franchise. It's very rare that people would have a complete new IP and it makes that much money. It happens so infrequently.
But surely... It's stopped working. They must be realizing that it's not working.
I think it's still profitable though. I mean, at a certain point, they're still going, well, we can keep on going with this because we're doubling our money, for instance, at the moment. You know, at some stage, I would say so.
Because even like the Terminator franchise, right? That must be dead. That must be dead. You've killed it. Like it must be done, dusted. There's no recovering that, right?
Oh, there'll be more Terminator movies.
For
sure.
You reckon?
Yeah, but well, for the reasons that you said earlier on about Alien, at some point somebody will watch the first Terminator movie, the second Terminator movie, and go, those two movies are great, and to more or less a regard, and kind of go, God, I wish we could get another Terminator movie that was just like them, because every new Terminator movie that's released is like, we're going back to the roots. That's the way the marketing always goes. We're going back to the roots of what made those films really good. And then they push it out, and then you go, it's not really, though. Or it is to a certain degree. Or, you know, it's not really the same. But it's very hard. One of the things that made T1, or the first Terminator movie, so good is the fact that it didn't really have, you know, the flashy budget. I mean, T2 was the completely opposite of that, where they threw all the money at it with very glitzy special effects. But they were very clever about it because they flipped that movie on its head the other way. They did something really novel and new with it, which was take Arnie's character and make him a good guy, absolutely. You know, and actually play with perception. So there was a franchise or a sequel that said, look, we're going to take your expectations of this and just going to go a completely other way in this, and that makes that movie successful, I think.
But I don't know, but isn't there is there a sense that just because you slap on the label of franchise XYZ on it, that you're meant to like it, or you're meant to, you know, but it is like Rings of Power. I watched the first 4 episodes and I checked out, right? And I think Lord of the Rings is the greatest fantasy series, book, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
But Rings of Power, I checked out. I thought it was, I couldn't, it wasn't great by any stretch of the imagination.
I'm not a big fan either.
And just because it's got Lord of the Rings on it, doesn't mean I have to like it.
Yeah, but it got you to watch it, didn't it? Though.
Well, not really.
You still did 4 episodes of it.
I watched 40% of it. It was and you know, and apparently, more than half the people that started watching this series didn't finish the first season.
It's not very good. For all the money that they spent on it, it's not very good. Your stories still have to be good. They still have to stand on their own 2 feet. And I think at a certain point, you will get people to invest time at the start and then go, because...
But then have they killed it then? That's it. You've killed Rings of Power. There's no coming back from it, is it?
Well, think of something that is really accepted to be great in the fantasy genre. Buffy the Vampire Slayer, right? Don't know if you're a fan or not, right?
I wasn't, but
right.
I'm aware.
So aware of it. The first series is not very good. There's not very much money or budget to it. It really should have died. Somebody should have said, no more of that, please. But they made it return from series 2. From series 2 and 3 especially are absolutely fabulous. And some of the best, genre kind of age TV that there's ever been, in my opinion. So you can rescue it, but it is the first series of the American Office. It's not great. You can rescue it, but it has to be good then afterwards. You don't get a second chance. If your second series isn't good, it's definitely gone, or you don't really hit the ground running. So people will tune in for this second series because there'll be a lot of marketing money pushed behind Rings of Power Series 2 when it comes out, because it'll have cost $1 billion or something. It'll be something stupid.
Yeah, but that one was a weird one because they got caught in all the lies and all the BS. Like all these super fans. Like, you remember those clips where had these people in a castle, and they were all flown to the same castle in Spain, in Mallorca, and you had these 3 super fans talking about how excited they were about it, and then someone actually found these super fans, went into the social media profiles, and none of them was talking about Rings of Power. None of them were. Yeah. It was all fake.
But I don't think that kind of market works anymore, because people do get found out. Things either have to be good. You can only spin, hype for so long. As soon as it's out there for people to watch, people are like going to view it on its own terms and then kind of go. Because like Lord of the Rings, as great as those books are, right? It is hard to pin down what is the magic sauce that makes them so great, if you know what I mean. It's a combination of a lot of things, and a bit like the Terminator movies, actually, if you want to go back, the character of John Connor is really uninteresting. So if you're going to base a series about John Connor and he's not interesting at all, and it's really Arnie that's interesting, I mean, Arnie's nearly 80, or he's 80, or you know what I mean? He can, again, you're going to get diminishing returns in putting him in the movie. So Lord of the Rings, is it Gandalf is really the thing that draws it all together? In which case you need Ian McKellen, who again is a very elderly man, or you're going to recast him. Morfydd Clark is a very fine actress, really fine actress, but is totally out of place in that world. Like, I do not see how that worked at all as Galadriel. I mean, Galadriel is the main premise of the character. I'm not sure that was the best place to go with that.
And I think the one thing that really failed for me is that the forging of the Rings of Power is the forging of the Rings of Power when, when Sauron corrupts the Númenóreans. And that happened over 10 minutes or something like that. Like, he passes by, sees a forge, and it's like, how totally uninspiring and uneventful and sort of lacking in moment, isn't it? It was the least momentous thing ever.
It's also the problem with telling a prequel. If you know where it ends up, and you know that certain people aren't going to die, it's very hard to create the drama that you need to in order to kind of hold people's attention.
Yeah, you say that, but I think it can be done. Like, the one thing, we're going back in circles here, but the one thing about the last Star Wars trilogy is that it made the Lucas prequels good by comparison.
Yeah,
and we knew that Obi-Wan was going to survive, and we knew that
that's right.
all the stuff. But it's still the story, even though we knew the ending. Sometimes with stories, it's the journey, not the destination, that matters, isn't it? So I think they could have done something a lot better with Rings of Power than what they did. I think you've got to respect those moments in the lore that everyone is familiar with. That's what you want to see.
But isn't it hard? I think it's one of the things that makes Game of Thrones kind of stand out, because it was so unpredictable in what it was going to do. It worked as a TV series because if you have a week between episodes, everybody theorizes about everything that could possibly ever happen in that week in between. And Lord of the Rings isn't a twisty-turny story at all. Classically, there's not. It's a journey. It's a typical hero's journey kind of story from start to finish. So there's only so much threat, etc., that can happen. And when you're reading a book, that's fine. You watch an hour's content, and then you have a full week to think about it. You're going to invent something that's way more interesting in that week, or you're going to hear something that's way more interesting that week than you're going to see the next week. It's just not possible. Whereas Game of Thrones, at least, was not afraid to kill off main characters. It was really one of the first books of its type that was like, we're going to be a bit ruthless about the expectations of who can make it to the end. I mean, ultimately, I think that was its feeling towards the end because it was afraid to do that, kind of when they run out of story, when Martin wasn't writing it anymore. But
yeah, but even Martin was critical of them because I remember seeing him on an interview where he said, if you've planted seeds or dropped clues along your story, and your readers guess what the ending is, I said, you've done a good job as a writer. You don't have to surprise them all the time. That's a sign that you've done a good job as a writer, that your reader is intelligent, that has picked up on these things, and then the payoff is satisfying when you see your expectations fulfilled.
Yeah.
Whereas that ending of Game of Thrones, when we got totally cheated out of the battle between Jon and the White Walkers, that's why it felt so flat and why people felt cheated, isn't it? Because you're building up something to then just sweep the rug away.
Well, you go for the focus tested ending, because that's what happens in that regard. Something that's so successful, I think that's what happens in a lot of major franchises. Those things get focus tested to death. The actual creative chances are taken out of it because, that's risky. This has got to make a lot of money. This is what we're going to do to resolve this situation. And it becomes like kind of this compromise right across the board of what could happen. I don't totally hate the fight. I mean, there are parts of it that are absolutely dreadful. That episode where they kill the Winter King, I don't totally hate that. I mean, I hate most of the rest of it. I think that one was okay, but mainly because I completely guessed to the T pretty much the last scene of Varya coming to do that, right? I mean, we were podcasting at the time, and I said, right, what's going to happen next week? And I said, this is what I think is going to happen, and it's pretty much exactly what did happen. So I sort of got that thing of exactly what you're saying. I was able to, in that one instance, be right, and I was like, right, okay, that sort of works because that's what I thought was going to happen. That's what they've been setting up. That's what they've been kind of doing. But you're right, insofar as if you're reading the book and you leave enough breadcrumbs. And don't make it too obvious what's going to happen. Go give it convention a little bit. It has to make sense, though, still. It has to make sense within the world that you've created and the stories and the characters that you've done. And you can't just turn around and kick. The good guy has been good guy along, and he turns dark at the end. If you really didn't leave that, like that's a twist and a turn, but yeah.
Yeah, because that's the thing as well about, as much as I hate the Wheel of Time books, and I watch the first season and I'm done with the TV show, still the TV show failed to pay fan service. There's an initial scene when Rand is running away from the Trollocs, dragging his dad along the way, and the fans got cheated out of that very momentous scene in the books. And I think even the fans were not happy about it because it would be the same as, I don't know, Lord of the Rings and not having the, Gandalf fighting the
Balrog,
the Balrog. It's you got to pay fan service.
You've got to say that and make that very cool. I mean, Wheel of Time.
The Wheel of Time.
Wheel of Time.
Let's not.
Go on. Right.
I haven't wanted about the Wheel of Time for 2 months, so it's about time.
So you are not a fan of the Wheel of Time, right? Of the big series, but you did invest a lot of time in it, right?
I did.
You did, right? Okay. So if you were going to dramatize that story, right, and you were thinking about things that we must do and things that we must not do, and then think about the things what would be interesting, right?
Yeah.
There's nobody was going, do you know, it'd be really interesting if we made everybody wonder who the dragon was going to be, and that was nobody's list.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So that was like, I was like, anybody's read the books is watching that going,
yeah.
Why is this the greatest decision? Right? This is bizarre. And the second thing you've got to do, and if you're going to be successful and talk about what is supposed to be good about the Wheel of Time, is the fact that Rand is one of the most powerful magic wielders in the history of all fantasy. Right? That is at the very core, I think, of what the Wheel of Time is supposed to be trying to do. Is that this one guy, all these people have been quite good at magic. Guys today are quite good at magic. This guy is on a whole other level.
Yeah.
And then you have the big magic wheeling at the end, and he's really nowhere to be seen. Like there's nothing happening. You just get a sense that he's just another dude that can shoot fireballs out of his hands. It's just It's supposed to be a power fantasy at the very least, if nothing else. Fantasy books of that ilk, that hero's journey, have got to be a power fantasy, and you got nothing. We get visions of him and his girlfriend at the end, and it was like, what are you doing? This is nonsense.
I wonder actually whether they're even going to finish the Wheel of Time TV show. It'll probably get cancelled after.
I think so, then.
3 or 4 seasons. I don't think they can do much with that.
It just strikes me, and I hate to say this, but if you're giving it to creative director, right, which they have in this case, it doesn't strike me that person. I think that person might have liked your video. I'm not sure he's a fan of the Wheel of Time because he doesn't seem to get what's good about that book for the people who like those books. If you know what I mean, which is pretty much your audience. You're hoping to bring other people along the way, but initially, that's the people who are going to sell your show.
Yeah, Brandon Sanderson was quite political about it, but reading between the lines, he was hired as some kind of knowledge consultant expert thing, and he kind of said that his suggestions got brushed aside, and that's the difference with Phil Jackson and Philippa Boyens and Frank Walsh. They were Lord of the Rings fans, like they really wanted to make that movie, and they really wanted to see those iconic scenes on the.
But because they had a couple of non-negotiables, and we're going to film these all back to back. This has to feel like a cohesive thing. We released them at stages, but we're going to film them all in one go. They did it obviously for budgetary reasons as well, but they were like, no, this has to have a feel of the hero's journey, or that we have the same cast, we have all the same people all the time. These things are important. This story, you just can't decide, we can't get them back for the second movie. We'll do something else. Like, all those things had to be off the table. But there is that adaptation works because it's very clear that the people making it were devoted to telling that story and actually knew what made those books cool, powerful. They knew what to cut out. Right, clearly. They knew what to remove. They realized that actually we're going to piss people off by having no Tom Bombadil in here. It's going to be okay, because you can read the books for that. If you really like that, this can be your starting point, and actually we want to encourage more people to read the books at the end of the day, because they're the things that we love, and it's kind of going from that. It's like a gateway into the books rather than kind of like the greatest hits of the books.
Okay, so kind of lessons here. Like, if you want to give a franchise or an IP to someone to direct, you're going to give it to a fan, someone that actually cares about.
Yes, indeed.
Which is a bit like the whole Henry Cavill thing with The Witcher, isn't it?
Yes, for sure. Yes.
He was a fan. He loved it, and when things went to pot, he went, "I'm out. I don't give a shit about this."
When it didn't fit what he sees as being true and proper to the character, he was like, "This is not the character. I don't want anything to do with it." And he had principles about that, which was great.
But the question that still lingers is, when do you know? Or I think you alluded to it before, that no franchise is ever dead.
Yeah.
That we can keep on flogging that dead horse for as long as we let enough time pass, and there's someone willing to give it another go. Is it?
Yeah, I mean, everything always has a life, unless it's morally bankrupt at a certain point. The time has moved on and shown that maybe a superhero, I can't think one off the top of my head, although Superman definitely did it, where he just killed all Russians. That was the idea. I mean, but Captain America sort of has that anti-Russian sentiment as well, or that killed all Chinese people or a certain race, things that were acceptable at some stage. You can't totally bring that story back in a modern setting. That story can't be told like that. But aside from that, everything else is on the table. Like, you can put any franchise from any time. I mean, look at horror movies, for the love of God. They keep on coming back every single time, even though the basic premise is the same premise for all of those types of movies. You're right.
Horror movies is probably the most clear case of keep on flogging at that horse. You're right.
And even in some cases, the new movies can be not even closely related to the original movies, but they use the name of it, and people will go to the cinema to see it. The new Evil Dead movie, I haven't seen it, but it seems like it has the logo that's pretty much correct. And aside from that, it's just another horror movie, I'm
a sucker for those, because like the Halloween.
Yeah.
I saw the last summer. I think I saw the most recent one. Like Jamie Lee Curtis is how old now, and she was still driving around and trying to kill what's his face in the
Michael
Halloween
Myers.
movies. Mike Myers, that's right. I really enjoy, as I enjoy the Saw movies. I've watched all of them, and I think at one point it became a bit of a joke because they always came out
Yeah.
on Halloween night. But yeah, sure, a bit of torture porn.
Do you think horror fans in general, and I know this isn't all horror fans because a lot of people just hate every new Halloween movie comes out, oh, it's not as good as the old ones kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I think in general, a lot of people go to watch a horror movie in the cinema with low expectations, if you know what I mean. They know what they want to get out of it. They want a couple of inventive and quick kills. They want to kind of be scared a little bit. And as long as that happens, yeah, it was all right.
Possibly what you're saying in very kind words is that you're not expecting anything great. And I think Ian from B&B Books, he would probably describe it as apple pie. It's nothing great, it's nothing amazing, but it's comforting. You know what you're getting. Bit of apple pie is nice, and away we go. Possibly.
Yeah, there's no high expectations. You're not looking for great pathos or great payoff or catharsis out of it. You're gonna know what you're gonna get. I want to be entertained. And the best thing about those movies is they usually aren't more than 90 to 100 minutes long. They do exactly what they do for a space of time because they know that's the audience. That's what they want. They don't need value for money. They want to have their bit and then go out.
Yeah. No, you're right. You're right. Yeah, so why have I got issues with the Terminator franchise or with Star Wars? But I'm quite happy to swallow however many Friday 13th movies. So,
do you reckon it's because it's genre storytelling? What's that? Because we have certain expectations of genre storytelling, sci-fi, fantasy, those kind of stories that I would consider to be better than your average crime story, if you know what I mean. There's usually another layer that sits on top, but you want something interesting as much as you want to be entertained. You want something that makes you think and go, okay. That's if I think of a lot of the greatest fantasy books that I've read, they are multi-layered. They're usually about more than just one thing. Even Lord of the Rings is about the interconnection of racism and cultures and the clash of all that and how ultimately we can get together as all one and fight, and become something better than their individuals, all that kind of stuff. I think that's possible. I'm very critical of a lot of sci-fi movies. Like I do not anything that's very rote doesn't do anything original. I always go, what was the point in making that sci-fi movie? But again, it's probably not for me. They're not making it for me. They're kind of doing it for somebody else. Good sci-fi movies in the past couple of while, something like Ad Astra, I really liked it, but a lot of people hate it because it was not the action, all of that kind of stuff they expected out of space. But to me, it was a thinking man's sci-fi. I liked it. I liked it a lot.
No, I hear you. Yeah, my issues with sci-fi is that it's the science bit. It has to be rooted in science, and it has to be plausible. Everything they show has to be plausible or conceivable. And when it doesn't, or it goes to fantasy / sci-fi, that's when I check out.
Yeah.
Maybe that's my so I'm happy to take dragons, balrogs, dwarves, elves, and all that kind of stuff because I know what the premise is. But just sci-fi, it's sci. We need the science here, and I don't know. But then again, Aliens is some kind of sci-fi / fantasy there.
Well, it's a horror movie as well. The first movie, especially, is a horror movie. It's very hard. I think Aliens
is not. Aliens is
not really.
Movie.
It's an action movie, but Alien is very clearly a horror movie. It is 15 minutes before anything happens in that movie because they're just setting atmosphere. Like it's phenomenal that way. I have read the entire book that was done on Alien. I think Alien first one is just masterful.
Yeah. Did you follow the Oliver Harper's retrospectives channel?
Yes, indeed. Brilliant.
Yeah. He put out a video a week ago. I think it was a 2 hour movie, 2 hour video. So it was a retrospective of the 4 Alien movies.
Right. I haven't seen it yet.
And like everything he does is really high level and very, very well researched. So.
Yeah, no, the making and the genesis of that, even the stuff I haven't seen, obviously Oliver's video, but what happened before they even shot a scene, and that is just utterly fascinating. With regards to that movie, how that story changed hands, how people wouldn't buy it, they didn't want to hire this unknown Swiss guy to do the character art. They thought it was just like, what are you doing? It's grotesque. It's ugly. The people will never buy this. It's unsellable. H.R. Geiger stuff. It's not. But Ridley Scott would not give up. He says, no, this is exactly what this film needs. If we don't have this, I don't think this film works to the same level. Nobody else is doing this kind of both anatomical combined with kind of technology thing at that time in the 70s. Like it just wasn't the thing. So such a great example of creative art of multiple kind of genres of both filmmaking, storytelling, and art, all kind of combining together to make kind of this great thing that birthed the franchise. Then like you were saying, there'll be more Alien movies in the future. That's gonna happen.
Possibly. I would like to see how, because I think there was an idea for the Ridley Scott Prometheus and Covenant and all the stuff to actually link up with the original movies, but I don't know if we're one movie away from that or what's actually happened to
it. Could be when nobody went to see Covenant or Covenant got slated, that kind of maybe put that in hiatus for a while. But I think there's definitely a chance because people will have nostalgia. The next generation will watch Alien and Aliens and go, these movies are awesome. They don't make movies like this anymore. And then somebody will go, God, it'd be a really good idea. This whole generation hasn't seen their version of Alien. They do. But everything goes in cycles. I'm loath to criticize the Marvel Universe and DC films because at least we got kind of comic book stories on cinema. Like if you'd have told a 15, 16-year-old version of me that cinema would be dominated by superhero movies, I'd have went, this is the greatest thing that's ever happened. Like, how soon is this going to happen? And it's just like everything else at a certain point. It outstays its welcome because it becomes less about the comic book and the art and all of that kind of stuff. I mean, I think that's one of the things that's really downfall. The idea that they created an idea that they all had to look the same.
Yeah.
They were shot with the same characters, these the same color filters, all of that kind of stuff is ultimately to its downfall. It gave it a consistency for a number of films, but at a certain point, you've got to rip that up and say, look, we've got to create something new here. You've got to at least create the different new art style or new look to the stuff that gives it a freshness.
And particularly, DC can do that because the DC underlayer, the whole Vertigo stuff from the 90s, to think that Hellblazer, Swamp Thing, and all those other comics take part in the same universe as Batman and Superman, it blew my mind. When I read the Hellblazer series or Swamp Thing, and when in one of the Swamp Thing arcs, it totally covers Gotham in this sort of forest thing, and Batman shows up. It's like, fuck, like,
that's good.
Like it's the same universe, but it's tonally and thematically, it's such a different thing. And as well with Hellblazer, you go to hell, you got demons, all that stuff, and then Swamp Thing appears, and in the controversial Batman Damned miniseries by Azzarello, John Constantine is there with Batman. So I got like, yeah, of course they are in the same universe, but there's very little crossover, and I think DC could go into very interesting directions.
Yeah, they can combine those smaller characters with the more recognizable ones. Like, you do not need a Batman versus Superman. One, because I think it's ultimately very uninteresting because Superman is that character. Like, I know why you would want to do it, but ultimately it's doomed to fail in some way. But you could definitely do those kind of crossover things where it's like, okay, even if it's a part of the story, or it creates, like you're saying, a different ecosystem nearly for that world. It kind of takes it out from what you're expecting to be something new.
Yeah.
That's interesting. But of course, they've also done, and I think I know your feelings in this, when you do something like Watchmen on video, on film, and you decide you're going to do panel by panel remake.
Yeah.
I just go, what? Why? It's like, what's the point of that? And especially from a good filmmaker, with good creative ideas, that just seems redundant.
I don't know. I enjoyed the Watchmen movie. I went to the cinema. I really didn't enjoy it. I've read the comics the comic a number of times, and as dismissive as Alan Moore is of every single adaptation of his work,
Yeah.
I think in this instance, I think they did as good a job as it could have been done.
It's not bad. Apart from Nathan, it's not bad. I mean, I nearly actually walked out of the cinema at the end. But anyway, there you go. I was like, you've taken the one thing that I think is absolute genius about this piece of work and changed it. The whole point of the thing is gone now. For a focus tested ending, I was just like, no, what? That's the one bit that you had not to change. Like everything else is panel by panel. You change that, but as I often said, and I've said this before, some people will agree with that, some people disagree with it. I get to have the ending that I like in the comic,
and
other people get to have theirs in the movie, and we're all happy, So I kind of sit in the fence in that one. Go, well, at least I have an ending that I'm happy with, and that's good.
Right. So another totally tangential. Right. Okay. What's happened to the Western genre? That's almost it was a thing that my dad loved, but it looks like it had its time, and it's gone, isn't it?
I'm so sad.
I'll tell you what, though, you might enjoy this. As you, I'm pretty sure, are aware, those spaghetti westerns were actually filmed here in Spain.
In Spain, yes, yeah, a lot of time.
Back in February, March, I took the family to the studios in Almeria where those films were made. So
wow.
we did a weekend trip, and it was like we had like a long weekend, and I just sort of booked the hotel, and I thought, well, I just take the kids, and we went with zero expectations. And don't get me wrong, it was shit. But we had a fantastic time. It was great because you really are in a desert. Like to think that it does look like the desert in California or Nevada, wherever it is, and you've got all the buildings and stuff like that, and they do like saloon fight reenactments, and they do like the shootout outside the saloon, and the guys ride horses and stuff, and it was shit, but we had a great time. It was super fun.
Did any of your family really sat down and watched westerns? Because probably a bit like yourself. Like I grew up, I used to go into my grandparents' house, and as soon as you open the door, it was full of smoke because my granddad chain smoked. But also the TV was turned up to like 11 with just cowboys and Indians and shooting in the background every time. Those were the two things that were very constant about that house.
Right. So it's a shared similar experience. So I grew up very close to my paternal grandparents because they lived in the same town. And like you said, so my grandfather was going deaf, but he always denied it, right? So the only movies that he could actually watch and follow the plot were action movies, because that didn't require him to listen to dialogue or anything like that.
Yeah.
And my dad was a big John Wayne fan. And back in the 80s in Spain, there were only 2 TV channels that you could watch. And guaranteed, Saturday afternoon or Sunday afternoon after lunch, you will have a Western on TV. And so there was a lot of that growing up.
Yeah, I love Westerns. In fact, I don't know if you know this, but I did a whole live show with a good friend, Salt Ronan, on a bit of Guinness Gather Westerns. So
I did watch that. I did.
So we got, I put out the question, and for good Western movies to other people, and we just got the most enormous list that you could ever come up with of modern Westerns, classic Westerns, and just kind of shows how popular and kind of wide ranging that whole series of films is, because essentially it's the same story every movie as well. There's not really a great deal a difference between a lot of them, and yet there's just something endlessly entertaining about it.
Yeah, I mean, I watched all of the time, but I remember as a kid, and these are movies that stay with you. Magnificent Seven.
Yeah.
I thought it was that's when Charles Bronson and Yul Brynner.
Mm-hmm.
These iconic actors that they just stay with you. Like those movies were great. Obviously, the Dollars trilogy is all a bit of a mix in my mind because I've watched them a few times. And
same for me as well. If somebody tells me one thing happens in one movie, I say I actually get the order mixed up all the time of which one's the first, second, third one as well.
Yeah. And a couple of them.
You've said about the Wayne ones, so the Rio Bravo Searchers, kind of even the Quiet Man, which is the Irish Western. Brilliant. Of some sort. Yeah.
So all of those, and is it the Treasure of the Sierra Madre with
yes, with
Humphrey Bogart?
Humphrey Bogart, indeed. Yes, they're very Westernish. Yeah, indeed. And a couple of them. Well, you've got obviously even more modern ones like the couple of Tarantino westerns. I think are terrific as well. Django and Hateful Eight, and I like them a lot.
Yeah, Django, I could do without the last 15 minutes. That false ending was a bit of a weird one, but Hateful Eight, yeah, absolutely.
Too long, both films probably too long. I think that's fair in both cases.
And question then, is Brokeback Mountain a Western?
Yes.
Right.
It doesn't fit the Western, damsel in distress kind of, shooting cowboys taking over your land kind of thing. But it's a Western setting. I think that does enough. That's enough for me.
That's a movie I've watched many times. Yeah. I really enjoyed that movie. Yeah, but what's happened? So like Westerns are out of
well, the last big one was obviously Power of the Dog, which maybe some people mightn't talk about that as a Western, which I thought was utterly brilliant by Jane Campion. That was nominated for the Oscars. It'll always a good Western will always find an audience, but I think there's not that enough of them for people to go, that's a good idea. That'll make money, because there's a lot being made that never really made any money. There was that period in the 90s where we had a whole run of them for a while after Unforgiven. We had our Tombstone, they all came around that time, and then that was the end of that period. We then had a couple of TV series, with Deadwood, even Westworld, first series, was a Western as well. People kind of go, oh yeah, these Western stories are cool, but I don't know. You've got to also remember that Westerns were the franchise of the 50s.
Yeah.
They made so many of them in the 1950s and then subsequently in Europe in the 60s that they kind of diluted to a certain point, which is why after this period's over, maybe superhero movies don't get made ever again in the same numbers that they ever do, because they've had their time.
It's a bit like war movies, isn't it? Because I'm sure a bit like me, you grew up with Guns of Navarone.
That's right. Yep.
Dirty Dozen, and all those movies that are absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
But they had their time, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think we grew up in a time, and I'm sure you did as well, in Spain, where our parents were able to talk about the fallout from the Second World War. Our grandparents were talking about the Second World War happening. So that was already in the zeitgeist of our lives. So actually seeing that play out on TV, on a movie screen, etc., you kind of go, my God, that was pretty serious stuff went on there,
Yeah. My grandfather actually did fight in World War II.
Right.
Although, anyway, that's probably a more private conversation. But he never actually talked about the actual war. He would tell you the funny stories about how hungry they were.
Yeah.
How cold it was, or how they will gamble for the Russians. But he never actually talk about being in action.
Yeah, I can't even imagine what you see those things in movies, and you obviously see the action and parts and all the rest of it, but you never really see life, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
During those things about the trench and the boring stuff, so to speak, but what is the real humanity? I mean, films touching it, TV series touching it a little bit, but you don't actually get to live it. in any kind of great way,
That's right. That's right. And so why do you think that Morricone, like European westerns, were, I'm not going to say better, but there's a great tradition of Western movies and also comics in Europe,
Right?
um, rather than in the US. Like the great Western comics, um, Alexis McCoy was a French-Spanish comic, and Marshall Blueberry is also another French comic. And it was Europe that kept that sort of Western comic tradition rather than the
Oh,
US,
that's interesting.
I believe.
The spaghetti westerns, I talked about this a bit at the time. There's like there's a bit more of an edge to spaghetti western. The heroes are more dastardly. They're not always just very good guys. They are often, imperfect, but
Yeah,
a
yeah,
savior. That's what makes them worth having in your town, is because they're not always a good guy, but they'll do the right thing. Kind of come the end of the day, they've got the good principles at the heart of it, even though they'll womanize or they'll drink or they'll do
yeah,
whatever. And I think that's another rewatchable kind of thing. I think that idea of having imperfect people as your hero will always. I mean, that still happens now, right? That's kind of the Batman character that we were
yeah,
talking about. Batman's kind of broody. He doesn't have great people skills,
yeah,
but he'll be there at the right time and he'll do the right thing, at the heart of it.
Mm,
So yeah, but spaghetti westerns, fabulous, and quite possibly the greatest one of them all being The Great Silence. If you've ever seen it, which
no,
kind of takes the whole western genre and kind of takes your expectations and flips it all on its head again. Brilliant movie.
right.
Keep it Il Grand Silencio.
So
As it would be.
I'm going to do a quick search. What was that called again? The Great?
The Great Silence.
Right.
So it cast a Frenchman in the lead role, Jean-Louis Trintignant, and he said
Right.
to Carpacci, I can't speak a word of Italian, can't speak a word of English, because they usually double them. And he says, I can't do anything. Why do you want to cast me? He says, it's all right. I've got it sorted. Your character is going to be mute. He's not going to speak through it the entire movie. And he went, really? How's that going to work? He says, trust me. And sure enough, that is how he used him for that, and never had him say a word of dialogue, and it wasn't a problem. Genius.
That's going to be, those 2 weeks are going to be home alone without the wife and the kids in August. That's going to be one of the moments, the Great Silence. I'll have that there.
Yeah, it's a great movie. It'll be good to hear what you think about it afterwards. Because it's a movie that they filmed three endings for.
Right.
And on the disc that I have, you can watch whatever one you want for your ending. So you kind of watch all three, and again, pick the ending that you like the best.
Interesting.
And that can be the canon story. So, but there is one at the end of the movie, of the main run of the movie, that you'll see, and you can tell me whether you would have liked a different ending.
Yeah. The other kind of movie that seems to have gone a little bit out of fashion is the murder mystery, isn't it? Although we had that Knives Out, Glass Onion thing, but I found them to be a bit lacking. Hammy might be the word to describe them.
Yeah, intentionally so. Yeah. I think they definitely play on that. The fact that it's all very nudge, wink, wink. Having a guy that Benoit Blanc, who pretends to be smarter than everybody else, but he comes across a bit dumb in other ways. I quite like those movies because they don't take themselves too seriously. They don't say that they're like the height of all intelligence, but murder mysteries, TV's full of them though.
Maybe I don't watch TV, but going back to when we were in the last century, I grew up watching all those movies with my grandparents and the TV shows. Murder She Wrote, Diagnosis Murder, the whole Hercule Poirot series, all those movies, just part of
Columbo. We were talking about Columbo today. I love Columbo and Quincy.
All of those.
Yeah, and actually, funnily enough, what do you call it? Moran Johnson, who made obviously Glass Onion and Knives Out, has done a TV series called Poker Face, which is out at the moment, where he is riffing on Columbo. This main character is a female version of Columbo.
Right.
And it sort of doesn't work for me. I was talking about this, literally having this conversation with my wife earlier on because we're watching. She's going to like this. I says, I do like it, but it's sort of contrived because Columbo was a detective. Hello, Aaron. He was a detective. He was supposed to investigate things. In Poker Face, you just have this person that arrives in town and isn't an investigator, but just sort of solves the problem. It sort of feels contrived, you know. Why is she investigating this? She doesn't know these people. She's literally just passing through town. It's entertaining, and they're very cleverly done in a lot of ways that those murder mysteries on TV were done. You know, they're endlessly entertaining. And in Columbo style, it doesn't do the whole, oh, I wonder who the murderer is. It kind of tells you who the murderer is at the very start, and then that spends the show kind of showing you how they get caught, which is really you know the interesting part, because it makes you kind of go, they're gonna, this is what they've done wrong. This is how they're gonna catch them. They kind of play that guessing game yourself.
Okay. I don't know. I just got like childhood memories of watching. You know, they would do like afternoon specials, and you have Murder She Wrote followed by Diagnosis Murder, like a double bill.
Great.
And stuff like that. You just sit there, you know, in the afternoon watching those things.
Yeah, it was Quincy, it was Diagnosis Murder, with the two that were back to back for me on TV when I was in my studying days. When you were off in the afternoons, or you're supposed to be doing something way more productive, but you just find yourself watching a couple of murder mysteries. I don't know were there ever. I suppose there were murder mystery films in the 80s. Like you said, Poirot. There, the last two major murder mystery films that I can think of are the two Poirot remakes by my fellow countryman Kenneth Branagh, The Death on the Nile and Murder in the Orient Express, which are both okay. I don't think they're great, but those are interesting stories. I like both stories in at least some form, whether in literary or in a previous adaptation of it. I'll take those, but murder mysteries, they can make a comeback.
Maybe they've been done to death as well, isn't it? Like you had these super prolific authors, Agatha Christie and Aaron Stanley Garner, and
that's right.
They wrote a lot of that, isn't it? You got plenty to get your.
And I think people have got very good at working out who the murderer is.
I never did, mate. But maybe I'm probably if I try now, I would also fail as well. But that's for me. That's what it was cool about it.
So I'm going to give you 2 tips that'll make you spot the murderer in every TV episode, or right? Okay, so there are 2 things that you're looking for. One is the most famous actor in a non-starring role, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so if you recognize a character from another TV series or another, the most famous person is the murderer. And the other one you're looking for, if you can't work it out from that, is who is the character that's unnecessary? You know, you might have a family, you know, and they're investigating, but the husband's sister is there. None of the rest of his family are there, but there's a husband's sister or something. That's her, right? Narratively, I always say, put yourself in the mind of the author, going, right, I need to create a murder. It has to be a character that doesn't need to be there. So they have to do it. So those are the 2 things. And 9 times out of 10, you've got the murder every single time. But again, the fun is trying to work out how it happened. What they did, what's the motivation, all of that kind of stuff. They're always fun. I always have a lot of fun, and I think that's where actually movies and books kind of are very similar. You can have a similar experience of reading a murder mystery in a book and watching a TV series. Those 2 things are very closely aligned, whereas a lot of other things, the experience is very different. Like I would say the experience of reading a Marvel comic is very different from watching a Marvel movie a lot of times. You know, they're not really the same. They're not tickling the same thing in my brain.
Absolutely. I think a lot of those Marvel movies they had the characters, but they sort of did their own thing. They didn't necessarily follow any particular plot line that they had in the comics.
Yeah, that's right.
And they still, although having said that, I mean, I know they had issues with rights and all that stuff, but there's one major Marvel story that they haven't done, which is the Fantastic Four and the coming of Galactus. And that would have been maybe a natural next phase, if you want, sort of building up to another epic moment.
But it's owned by Sony, I think, Fantastic Four. Or
somebody
else owns it.
They had the same issue with Spider-Man, isn't it? That they have to wait for
that license to expire, and then
which is the same as with the X-Men, because Fox.
Yeah, that's right. Them. Fox have it. Yeah. That's exactly right.
But they got some great storylines there. But again, those Fox X-Men movies were way darker than the Marvel universe, and particularly the Wolverine ones and Old Man Logan and all the stuff. So,
but they paved the way because they did the superstar cast long before the Marvels did the superstar cast for the X-Men movies, and kind of said, look, here are a lot of people that you recognize, and each famous person has their own their own importance here. So it meant that you didn't just have one big main actor and a whole lot of other ones who were obviously less important in the universe. Sort of everybody was famous, or everybody was going to be famous, or on the rise. To do that, the X-Men movies are great.
Yeah, the X-Men movies, and they sort of started to do like the whole thing. Like only Wolverine got his own movies.
Phoenix, the Dark Phoenix movie did as well, but yes, the Jean Grey one.
They could have done all of that, and everyone liked them when they came out because it was the first really superhero type assembled cast, like you said, and it was great. I remember going to the cinema to watch it; it was fantastic.
And I could be wrong. Only 2 hours long though. I'm I'll have to check the runtimes. Now maybe Last Stand broke that mold, but they were not overly long. They were not 2.5 hours long to do this kind of thing where we're going to tell origin story and another story side by side all the time. I think length is my biggest problem with them. And I'm a guy that reads 700-page fantasy books. Like, attention span isn't generally my problem, but at a certain, if you're if everything's very one note, then you're not getting the ups and downs that go with it.
The thing with the book is that if you get fed up, you can always put it down and come back to it.
That's right.
Later. Whereas I always feel like I'm cheating. If I watch a movie in installments, I feel like I'm not doing it justice.
Nearly every movie I watch is installments because I start watching one before I go to sleep and I get about the first 45 minutes done.
Yeah.
And then I go to sleep and then I pick it up and the kids go in bed and I start a new one at 45 minutes to go. I probably should fix that and just do the 1.5 hour movie, in one sitting. But it kind of, I don't know, it creates impetus or something. And it also lets me ruminate on that movie during the day, which I think is often one of the funnest parts about watching movies is kind of seeing what kind of themes or what kind of stories kind of you take away from it.
Yeah, I don't know. I need to get back on it because of late, I haven't really watched many movies recently. Like the only ones I can, I did bother renting them out on Amazon was the Batman with Pattinson and Creed 3. Although I really enjoyed the Tetris one.
Oh, I haven't seen that. The one that's not with Taron Egerton.
It's a bit. There's a lot going on. Like the story is really complicated, so I think they simplify and you don't quite get the full picture. But it was enjoyable, and also the one about Michael Jordan signing up with Nike.
Oh, yeah.
Those interesting from a sort of historical perspective.
Yeah, they tell an artifact of time and a story that you didn't know. Yeah,
and it's very sort of culturally significant for people like us. Like we lived through the whole Game Boy Tetris thing.
That's right.
And how many times did you ask your parents for a pair of Nike Air Jordans?
In my case, never, because we couldn't afford them. I grew up in a generation where there was no money.
Oh no! Don't get me wrong. I asked for them. I never got them.
Never got them. Maybe I wished for them. I was very much the gadget person. Right. Trainers, etc. I don't know. Like I got one pair of trainers and had to last me 6 months, and often they were hanging. I played football all day. I don't know if you played soccer, football, whatever anybody who's watching wants to call it. I just did that all day, every day as a boy. Like that was pretty much it. So my trainers were in bits at a certain stage because you were playing out in the street on tarmac, and they just get ruined.
Yeah.
In the hope, of adding a bit of extra swerve onto the ball when I kicked it.
Right. I think this has been great, Chris.
Yeah.
But I think we're now going off completely. So anyone that's still around there, thank you ever so much for joining us. And we'll try to arrange something else.
Yeah, indeed. I'll have to return the favor. See if we can pick a topic. If you get back on the train of finding new and exciting fantasy series, maybe I'll have to get you on. And
well, something really strange happened this week on. I got a message from an editor at what's the publisher? I don't know how you pronounce it. Baen Books, Baen.
Okay.
Because I'm doing the read along with Ian of the
Christopher Rocky series. Yeah,
yeah. And apparently Roku has moved over to Baen.
That's right. So he did. Yep.
And the editor messaged me and said, "Hey, we enjoy the coverage you've been doing.
Very
Would
good.
you like to receive some free books while you wait for the next installment?" And
awesome.
I just replied and went, haha, very funny. Well played. It's like, no, it's for real.
Genuine offer, yeah.
Go and check your email. And I went, oh, fucking hell, all right. So I went to my email and I had this guy's name. So I went on the internet, I searched it, it seems legit.
Right, okay.
And it's like, yeah, I said, yeah, I'll happily read books for free. But, just to warn you, I'm going to say what I think. I don't feel obliged to like anything just because it came for free. And he went like, yeah, sure, no problem. So excited, totally unexpected. Don't know where that came from.
I'm glad to see the series has turned around for you at the very least, in terms of enjoyment as well. Because you're now a book ahead of me. But I've sort of enjoyed it the whole way along to some degree.
Right.
I didn't have too high expectations. I think that was my main thing.
Like I said, I think the third book picked up a bit, and luckily the next ones seem a little bit shorter.
Yeah,
so you don't have to plow through 789 pages of it. But anyway, excellent stuff. So thank you, everyone, and anytime Chris will arrange something.
Yeah, a lot of fun. Thank you very much for having me, Jose.
Cheers. Thank you, everyone.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.